So Yolande introduced me earlier. I just want to introduce myself one more time. My name is Nina Papadopoulos, and I am working with this great team at USAID to try to advance the third goal of USAID's education strategy. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here in this room with you this morning. And I see so many friendly faces, and I also see faces of folks that have paved the way for us, that really started thinking about this work 10, 15 years ago. Jane Benbow, Carl Triplehorn, John Gillies, so many of you. It's such an honor to have you here today and to be in this room with you right now. We would not be able to discuss this work without recognizing that there's a real critical group that's actually missing from this event this morning. And I think that so many of you would agree with me when I say that, so much of why we need to reflect on our practice and reflect on the action we're taking has to do directly with the folks that are sort of in the trenches right now in the field, doing this work on our organization's behalf, on the US government's behalf, going to those coordination meetings every week, trying to figure out how to get a meeting with the Minister of Education, trying to figure out how to convince that dad that it's not a bad idea to send his daughter to school. We are really sort of cognizant and aware that this particular community and this network relies heavily on their expertise, relies heavily on the sacrifices that they make every day for us and every day for the children of the world. So we wanted to sort of bring in a little bit of a taste. We have a man on the street type video montage that we'd like to show you just to ground what we're doing today in what we're calling the voices from the field.
This crisis, the Syrian refugees crisis in Lebanon, has been here for the past 3 years. For some people, this would look like a long period. For us, this is not a long period to know how best to manage, how best to help, and what to offer. We need probably a bit of coaching and training regarding the small things that we could do that would make a large impact, and the largest things, the biggest things that we could do and that would last, and that would make us sustain our educational system and help it for both all the vulnerable children, whether they are Lebanese or Syrian.
The biggest current challenge in the education sector for me in our country is the lack of quality on the supply side. What do I mean? I mean that the infrastructures, the materials, the instructors, the systems of monitoring that should be put into place that will help make a viable education sector, they are lacking or almost non-existent in our country. So to me, that is the greatest single challenge that the education sector is facing. Teachers need to be fully trained. Learning materials need to be adequate, they need to be fully equipped, they need to be regularly revised, and then the instructors themselves need to be fully trained so that they can be able to impart education onto the young people. So lack of quality. In our work in the rural parts, we see a lot of less monitoring on the side of the educational stakeholders. Teachers do their own thing in terms of teaching, in terms of the time that they spend in classes, the materials that they offer, and there's nobody to checkmate them. That is also a problem. What inspires me most about my job is the late President Mandela once said that education is the powerful tool to bring in development in a country. So I believe that what we are doing in the educational sector in terms of providing alternative basic education for Liberian youth is a powerful tool that we can use to help bring about development, to help bring about the change that is needed in people's lives. That's what inspires me most about my job.
In terms of what are the research needs of Lebanon for effective programming, considering the fact that we're in a conflict situation, there's a huge there's a huge problem in terms of refugees, in terms of student crisis, interreligious conflict, issues within the country itself, from before the war and then now with the recent events in the region. The biggest issue is bridging the gap between research and practice. There's a lot of emphasis on research from an academic perspective, and there's a lot of projects and work on the ground, but there's not enough that is done in collaborating or in bridging how can research be used at the programming level and the project level, and how can be adapted for the local context so that it's not purely theoretical. There's a few researchers and few publications in that area, and a few people that are working on adapting international and local research on the local context.
The current challenge of education in South Sudan is the quality of education. South Sudan, as we know, has got a problem with the quality, especially with the issue of teachers. Most teachers in this country are not well trained, and therefore this means a lot for the quality of education. And another biggest challenge which I can add to this is the current crisis, the war that is taking place here. So it has hindered the education system in the country.
I would say Pakistan's security situation continued to have an effect on education. Nowadays, the security and economic situation in Pakistan is under stress, and education is the worst affected sector in Pakistan. The primary completion rate in Pakistan is about 34% for females and 47% for males, which shows that people in the 6th largest country of the world are unable to get basic education. The biggest challenge in education is access to quality education and different education systems in Pakistan. For example, public schools, private schools, including elite and low-cost private schools, madrasas. And the curriculum taught in all these schools are different. This creates disparity among people, dividing them into segments. Gender discrimination, a very small allocation of funds for education, about 2% of the total GDP, are also big challenges. For the question, what inspires you most about your job? I have only one sentence to say. I'm paid for what I love to do. And for the question, if you could be granted one wish for making education in your country better, what would it be? I would say ensure transparent and merit-based teacher recruitment and link teacher professional development with career development. Thank you very much.
أهم التحديات اللي تواجهها وزارة التربية والتعليم هي الوضع الأمني والسياسي اللي يعيق برامج التنمية على مستوى البلد. من التحديات الأخرى اللي هي ضعف الإقبال، تسرب الفتاة من التعليم.
اللي حفزني لاشتغل في مجال الدعم المجتمعي أن نسبة الأمية المرتفعة بين صفوف النساء في اليمن. هذه واحدة من المشكلات اللي أدت إلى كثير من الظواهر، منها تسرب الأطفال صغار السن من المدرسة وانعكاسه على المجتمع. عملنا على أنه من الضروري أن نقوم بعملية التوعية المجتمعية للمجتمع بحيث نسهم الآباء والأمهات على إعادة أبنائهم إلى المدارس وتحرير الآباء والأمهات من الأمية من خلال فتح فصول لمحو الأمية في المدارس والدعم المجتمعي من قبل مسؤولين محليين في المحافظة.
أمنياتي هو استقرار الوطن واستمرار بناء قدرات وزارة التربية والتعليم وكادرها الوظيفي، واستمرار نهج القراءة المبكرة في الصف الثاني والثالث نتيجة للنجاح الذي ظهر من شهادة وزارة التربية والتعليم وكل الخبراء المحليين في نجاح هذا البرنامج.
Pretty inspiring. So, you know, with all the global attention that we're seeing these days on what's going on in the world, education, the right to education, what's the education in crisis and conflict environments, we feel, and I hope everyone else does too, I hope it's just not because this is my job, that the momentum around action in this area is moving at warp speed. And I mean, it's an opportunity, but it's also a huge challenge for all of us. And I think that we heard some calls to action this morning that are pretty important to keep in mind as we move forward. So, you know, our objective here today is threefold. And, you know, first of all, we want to make sure that we share some of the thinking around the most urgent issues facing our work in this particular area. And we also want to start to identify ways for us as a community to gain greater knowledge and skills as professionals. And finally, to discuss how to build the capacity, to build all of our capacities to move forward for improved action and results. So I want to make sure that everybody's in the right place. And just sort of answer this question by standing up, please. So thinking back to the last project design you worked on, would it have been valuable for you to have had the time and space to discuss your ideas with an expert in the field? I always think of this as like calling a friend. Would that have been useful for you? If that's the case, please stand up. Okay, good. That's great. All right. I just have one more question for you. How many of you wish, or have ever wished, that you could have had an open and honest dialogue about the risks and vulnerabilities in a particular project design that you were working on? All right, we are all in the right place right now. Great. Thank you, and thank you for your honesty.